I work both in policy and science, so I'm not quite sure what you mean. But I think cannabis is the most wonderful and valuable substance and can be of great benefit to man in many ways, in increasing creativity and vitality, improving circulation, helping depression, many aspects. I think it has great value. And I think it's completely wrong that although it's the most used drug in the whole world, 4% of the world's population, 190 million people, are said to, by the UN, to use cannabis, so that it's 80% of all illegal drugs. And no one looks at it at an international level. It was made illegal in 1961, and it's remained illegal since then. And at meetings like the UN, where I went, I've got a NGO which is accredited by the UN, so I go to their meetings, they never mention cannabis, because actually cannabis is the mainstay which holds up the war on drugs. And if we got cannabis out of the war, if it became a controlled legal substance, a regulated substance, then the whole war on drugs would collapse, because it would only be 1% of the world's population who use other illegal substances. And they couldn't spend those billions of dollars and all that terrible unhappiness caused by the war on drugs if cannabis wasn't within the system. So I decided, since I value cannabis very highly, and it was totally left out of all considerations when books were written about a famous book called Drug War Heresies, was written by Peter Reuter. It hardly mentioned cannabis. So then I decided to convene a book by the world's leading experts, which would be an overview on cannabis policy and the science of cannabis, the harms, analyse the harms known to the current day, and then go into different ways that countries regulate it around the world. And so that's what this book has done in a very academic fashion. And at the end, these very highly establishment drug policy analysts come to the conclusion that there are many different options. The criminalization of cannabis is definitely non-productive and harmful, and is not proportional to the harms it does. Cannabis is actually very low in public harms. Of course, it has some vulnerable few who react badly to it, and maybe it increases the possibility of psychosis in some. But overall, it's much less harmful than alcohol or tobacco or coke or amphetamines. So it's the least harmful of the psychoactive substances, and yet there are more arrests for cannabis than any other substance. In America, there are over 800,000 arrests a year for cannabis. So the book, one has various conclusions. One is that cannabis, which probably you know as well, is not a harmful substance. Another conclusion is that whatever the policies are towards it in different countries, actually they make no difference, the policies. The number, the prevalence, the amount it's used in different countries has absolutely no regard of the policies. In fact, in countries where the policies are the most severe are the countries where there's the biggest use. So, and countries which have more liberal policies, like Holland and Portugal, actually have a lower use than America or the UK. So that points to the view that policies which criminalise the youth and very often the discriminated minorities, or the ones who are caught up in the police work, that it's not a good idea. And then there are different ways one can decriminalise, depenalise, all these different ways. And they're all better than full prohibition, but they still have their shortcomings. And the only way that one can overcome, how does one regulate the substance? How can one label its strengths and its constituents? Because I've done research on the importance of a balanced THC, CBD, and the other constituents. You want to have it balanced. So the only way to regulate and inform and educate people about the dangers, about the strengths, about how you take it and responsibility is by a regulated market. And one cannot legally have a regulated market within the present international conventions. So in order for a country to move down a regulated direction, a regulated market for cannabis, they have to overcome the conventions, the international conventions. And our workbook tells people, countries, governments, how you do that. There are basically two ways to do it. One is denouncing the international conventions and then re-acceding with a reservation on cannabis. And the other way is for a group of countries to have a new convention on cannabis. And for that, I would hope that maybe Brazil would be a leading member with countries like Spain and Portugal and Netherlands and other countries of Latin America. Very much. And Ruben Cesar Fernandez said he'd very much like to translate it. So I hope that happens. And it's not really true to say it's my research. I did it because I thought the drug policy world needed a book like this, which was fully academic and laid down the facts. But actually the research I do is more into the science underlying cannabis. Because so far in the world, the only science done is science which proves its dangers, because that's the only science which is financed on the whole. So what I do through the Beckley Foundation is research what are the neurophysiological changes and the changes in blood supply and neurons and electrical activity behind what people experience as beneficial on cannabis. And then another project we're doing is looking at cannabis and creativity to research how and if it stimulates, propitiates creativity. And another research project I'm doing, I do all of these with leading universities. I work with them and to get the research going. And another one is to look into the different constituents. I don't know if you know, I'm sure you do probably. THC is the compound which gets you high, but it makes people very shaky. And now, in recent genetic modifying, we've got more and more THC and less of this other compound, which is called CBD, which is actually a relaxant. And in nature, the two come balanced. So THC gets you high, and the CBD relaxes a person. And in modern skunk in England, and indeed in America, because I've been testing this, it's mainly THC without CBD. So I'm very interested in bringing back the CBD into cannabis, because I think the other elements have value too. And what I've just I'm setting up in California at a very big dispensary, is so that we test all cannabis going out for its ratio of THC and CBD, and then we have questionnaires to assess how the people react to what symptoms, what type of cannabis treats them better, and then we'll get a big database, because they have about 30,000 people at this dispensary. Hopefully we'll get a very big database of what types of cannabis treat what pain or sickness or whatever the problems are, what type works best.